research, incubation, and outreach on games, serious games. So, and if you are joining, please do mute your mic as you come on so that we don't get feedback, etc. So, or if you want to do that as host, or you want to mute people, that'd be great. But who's talking and why are we talking? That's always important, right? So, these are some fine folks. You might see them in your little videos up there. But who are we? So I'm James Casey. I'm the one talking right now. I'm a professor of game design. I'm also the director of before mentioned Virginia Serious Games Institute. And I have over 12 years of experience in the games industry, making games before I came to teach and after I got my master's in business. Next up will be Sang Nam, who is also a professor of game design, but he also is the director of our game design program here at George Mason University, has won numerous awards as well as contracts for some of the work he does in serious games, and has his master's in fine arts as well. And then finally, Eric's going to talk to you about this future and communities and all that stuff. He is also a professor in game design, go figure, as well as the associate director of the game design program. And he has 20 years plus of experience in the game industry across a lot of different companies, a lot of different things. We have a lot of background in games, and that's why we're here to talk about it. But with that in mind, what are we actually going to talk about? And I know we might have put out some press on why we're talking, but really it boils down to a few points, and we're going to go on to in more details. But games are immersive and everywhere, right? You can see them in culture, you can see them in history. They provide outlets, they provide education, they provide a lot of different things, right? And the idea of games and play are very educational. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But what's also interesting is they create these communities and culture. And that's where the idea for this whole talk came around, and how it kind of can be expanded and used to do education. And that these games and gaming technologies are just going to become more and more part of our lives. And so really at the end of the day, we can learn from games, and we can make learning better. We can make communities better. We can make our cities better. And we can use these technologies and these processes, and we're going to talk all about that today. So that's the overview. With that in mind, I'm going to start off, and I'm going to give you kind of a primer. I'm going to set these folks up with a little bit of past and a little bit of present. So let's start with the history. Games have run around a long time, right? I mean, you think about it like, think about Mancala. People were moving little pebbles in little dirt divots. There's the Olympics. Sports are games. All these games that you've probably played, even as you were youngsters, from Monopoly, which broke up families, and cards or Mahjong or whatever it may be that you grew up with. Games have been around a long time, and they come around in a lot of formats, right? They've been analog, where we got cards and little placeholders and rocks, to now digital and other formats. But really, games boil down to some core elements, and we're going to talk a little bit more at length about this and really how they get formulated into education and later communities. But they're about rules and structures, and they often have reward or punishment, wins or losses, and all these different elements that come together about why a game is fun. It's a form of play. It's what you do. You pass time, you learn, and all these things to come together in games. One of the really interesting things, and I love this quote, it's by Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Fred Rogers, who did a lot of work with children, has an early learning center now still that continues on in his name. But he looked at play as if, a lot of times we look at play as like, hey, this is something you reward your kids with if they did their schoolwork, right? Oh yeah, you get an hour on the device. Where you can go outside and play, like it's disparaging, right? But for children, play is very serious learning, as Mr. Rogers said. It's really the work of their childhood, right? They learn a lot from play, whether it's cooperation or competitiveness or all these different elements. Games and play is their way of experimenting with the world. And wouldn't it be interesting if we could continue to do this as adults within our jobs, within our lives, within all elements and ages, and within society and our cities as a whole? And so that's what we're here to talk about. I mentioned this briefly already, but think about how games have evolved. We had the the Mancala. I love alliteration. Mancala to the Magnavox, instead of Atari. These digital games, right? So analog to digital, and now you have virtual reality, right? And all these elements there, and it's like, how do these things all come together, and how do they become better? How do they go from it's just stuff from the past to here's something that passes the test of time? Games have evolved. They become part of the different mediums, part of the different cultures, part of the different communities over time, and that's really what we're here to kind of address and show how we can leverage that going forward. So today, everybody thinks of games, right? Good or bad. Some people are like, oh, it's addicting and things like that. But games are a thriving global medium. If you just think about video games, the digital video games, the stuff that you can play on your phone or something, it does a lot of money. People love games. Video games do more annually in revenue than movies and music combined on a worldwide basis. Think about that. And that's even before the pandemic came along and kind of ruined things for movies for a little bit. Video games is a huge medium. It's because it can do a lot of things that other mediums can do, but do it in an interactive and immersive way that some of these others can't. Let you be part of the action. And the thing is, games are finding ways to get into your lives in new innovative ways, right? You probably all recognize the little green and gray boxes over on the right-hand side that represent Wordle, this phenomenon of a word game, right? Sure, we've had Mastermind or Hangman or any of these games in the past, right, where you figure out what a word is, but Wordle captured people's imaginations. And what was a solo game? It's, a single player game. There isn't really any mechanism for it except for sharing built in, but that sharing element became what drove Wordle to become a phenomenon. It's because people shared their scores, like, oh, I got this in only 3 tries, and here's my little Wordle squares, and like suddenly it's being passed around, and a community sprung up around this little game that somebody invented. I think they said they invented it for their girlfriend, and they put it out there, and then all of a sudden the Times is buying it and putting it as part of their games collection, and it becomes this way to bring people together. And so games have this amazing capacity for that. There we go. But they're also good at education. And really what differs from when you make, say, an entertainment game to a serious game is often just the goal, right? Entertainment games, yeah, we want them to be fun. Serious games, we want you to learn something. We want you to simulate something. We want to change your mind on something. And these goals don't have to be exclusionary, right? You can have a game that's fun, but also teach you something. You can have something that simulates something or lets you learn or play with something, and it can still be fun. And it should be. This idea of games is what's going to help us really learn how we can better assess and analyze learning outcomes. It's not just quizzes, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's 3 elements I want to talk about from games before we get into some of the other topics that really we can take away and we can apply, and why games are great for potential education. And those are platforms and processes and psychology. And again, even if you're not a gamer, I think you'll get some of these and they'll make sense to you, and you'll see kind of how they have this ability to become something better. Games exist in a lot of different platforms. We mentioned this already, right? They're still analog, they're still digital. There's still this idea of emerging technologies like AR, VR, 3D, cloud. It's taking the best of everything because it can exist in any of these forms. In any of these forms, it's an interactive medium where we can apply all those things like mechanics and things like that, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can put all these things together, and everybody has these. Everybody has their phone now. You can have games and you can send it out to millions of people across the world because it's taking advantage of the mediums we have. And it can be paper and pen. It used to be a lot of games were played that way. It can be on your iPad or your iPhone or your console or your TV. We have ways of getting it to people. And it also has a lot of interesting processes. So The mechanics of games allow us to replicate and duplicate mechanics that exist in the world that some people may or may not be able to do. I'm not a kung fu fighter. I can play a game where I can learn and do kung fu. I could play a game where I'm in another country or another world. I could create a game where I'm fighting fires and allow myself to simulate a fire, but with so many different variables, it would be hard to replicate and or train in real life. And the mechanics of games, these processes, the platform itself, all these things kind of come together to make it a great educational tool. And so these processes, they hit your creative mind, they hit your analytical mind, they hit math and science and writing, and all these different elements can come into games. And it's not just that we're, for education purpose, that we're just quizzing you on this. It's not the bottom of that Bartle's taxonomy. It's we can actually let you play with and experiment like a crash test dummy, right? Different things and see for yourself how things work. We allow you to actually interact and work with the material, and that is amazing. And so one of the last things I want to hit on before I pass on the mic is psychology of games, right? People don't think about that necessarily when they think about games, but games are built around motivators, whether it's, history, sports, of old games or new games. It's all about risk, reward, exploration, competitive nature, cooperative nature, social elements, like the Wordle element, sharing to social media has just made it huge. And of course, learning. You have to learn. And if you love what you're doing, if you're engaged by what you're doing, they all lead to engagement, you're going to learn more. You're going to get achievements. You're going to get awards. You're going to be influenced to do more. And so we can take that element of why I just want to play another game. I want to put another quarter in the arcade. If you're old like me, you remember that. It's that element of I want to keep doing this, and that's going to be applied to education through games. So finally, games allow us to connect people. They've evolved, their goals have evolved. We got educational games, serious games, and communities have sprung out amongst games, games as a whole, games as specific, and they bring their own cultures and norms, and this engagement generated by games is huge. So apparently Serial likes that. So I'm going to pass over real quick control to Sang, who can take over. Go ahead, Sang. There you go. And he's going to talk next.
All right, let me set my timer first, because sometimes whenever I talk about game, I get too excited and then just keep going and going and going. All right, my name is Sang Nam, and I'm a director of computer game design program at George Mason University. And today I'm going to talk about post-pandemic education augmented by gaming culture. Okay, the first slide. The impact from the pandemic. Obviously, COVID-19 dominated 2020 and impacted learners worldwide. This statistics basically shows us that 1.38 billion learners are impacted by national school closures worldwide. I mean, this is amazing, right? Because if you really think about it, yes, pandemic changed everything. Sometimes I think about the phrase we are using, back to normal. And then I think about, well, the word forever changed, period. So even though we say back to normal, but probably we're not going back to the way it was. I mean, definitely pandemic changed a lot of things, and then we probably don't realize, but this changed the way we live. And if you think about what happened in early 2020, school closure or switching to online platform, it happened too sudden and without any preparation, and obviously it gave us many issues. And then I really want you to kind of revisit the idea. I mean, even now, this is an international conference, and then we are actually presenting using Zoom. So what the pandemic taught us, okay, electronically mediated communications are nearly as good as the real communications. Well, people might argue over this, but I mean, think about it. Like if you think about the whole closure, school closure, people thought, oh, this is end of education. But actually, it opens up new possibilities for online education. And then if you think about company, some people actually prefer work from home. And then if you realize that even now we sort of have meaningful communications using Zoom. So in a sense, this electronically mediated communications kind of allow us to have this meaningful relationship with someone uh, far away, regardless of what time zone we are in. And one more thing we learned from the pandemic, our kids, they're more proficient in digital life. And obviously, in my generation or older generation, had an issue to switch it to this online platform. But our kids, surprisingly, they actually made really quick and fast adjustment. And then they began enjoying their digital life fully. And another thing is game can help. That's what I'm going to talk about in this session. So game is part of our life. Even before the pandemic, we used to use the phrase such as play fair. Life is a game, that kind of thing. And then I found this quote by Albert Einstein. He said, life is just like a game. First, you must learn the rules of the game and then play better than anyone else. So in a sense, we kind of look at our life and then we did have this analogy that comparing our life to a game, because life or whatever we do, sometimes it has the rules and then we sort of play that system and to advance or go ahead of other people. That's sort of mimics the game. And then as this TV series or like Netflix dramas reflect our society, it's now, I mean, we're so used to see this types of title like Game of Thrones or Squid Game. And again, we see these types of media products because these reflect the real world, which now embrace games more than ever. And changes in education. Does multitasking work? I mean, this is something people always argue and ask. Multitasking works. Probably before the pandemic, people really didn't realize we had this traditional classroom. You really have to focus on the subject matter for usually 45 or 15 minutes. But now we realize maybe learners these days like learn things differently. So sometimes people do multitasking, and then sometimes they can process all these different things at the same time. So again, this pandemic situation kind of validated all these thoughts about 21st century learners. Okay, 21st century learners, they probably can do multitasking and they can process the smaller segment of knowledge at the same time. And then they sometimes actively participate in those learning activities if they like this subject matter more. And then again, this pandemic situation kind of gave us this opportunity to look at the education in different angles. And then now we try to think about how we can educate our children or 21st century learners better with thinking about all these changes. So one thing we can conclude is everything changes all the time. And then education should too. Oops. So one good thing about game is game actually help us be engaged more. And then I want you to think about students these days. They're proactive prosumers. Prosumers stands for producer plus consumer. So if you think about even in education, okay, learners, okay, well, traditional learners only consume the knowledge generated within the classroom. But now we are dealing with different kinds of students. And then we kind of see students as co-inquirer. So from passive spectator or consumer of the knowledge, now we have this proactive prosumer. As they consume those knowledge, they want to produce other contents using the knowledge. So if you think about this phenomenon in Squid Game, yes, Squid Game was very popular. I totally understand that because the cruel reality of the world kind of somewhat reflected in this game, and then people loved it. But one thing I really want you to think about is how young kids or how younger generation responded to this phenomenon. If you actually Google like Squid Game online, you will find tons of online games, like online game version of Squid Game, like people played. So that's some like a perspective change because traditionally, okay, a lot of times people kind of stays as a passive consumer of the knowledge or this media product, but now they actually want to participate in more with the contents they create, or they just don't want to just watch this passively. They actually want to play it as they watch those games on TV or online. So don't tell me how I'm supposed to feel. I want to feel it myself. So even in the online space, this is kind of important because traditionally our education focus on passing the knowledge to the next generation. Okay, so a lot of times we utilize text information or sometimes audio, but usually it was kind of passing over this information and knowledge in a passive format. But now, next generation, especially 21st century learners, they want to participate in those learning activities so that they can really feel and learn with their own experience. And I want to talk about the power of Discord and no one left behind. So Discord is online cloud communication tool helped during the pandemic. It helped a lot of students and kids stay engaged and connected. So we do feel this comfort from being connected to others. And then pandemic actually disconnects a lot of people. And then you probably remember the news, oh, people getting lonely and people get these psychological issues because they're not connected to other people physically. But surprisingly, our kids, they kind of learned how they can be connected to one another using these new tools, new technologies. And then a lot of them, yes, it didn't really replace our like in-person experience or physical experience, but this became kind of trend that our kids, our children kind of try to find solution to have that meaningful connection, even using, even though it's not like in-person or physical interaction, but they use this online interaction to sort of kind of help them stay connected. And one thing I want you to think about is there is this Halo Alpha wiki page. So this is the biggest wiki created by gamers, and we can learn from this this wiki that human instinct, about our human instinct. We want to belong to something bigger than us, and then sometimes like people voluntarily spend their own time to do meaningful thing. And then Halo Alpha was one of one of really interesting online activities, because gamers come together and then created this huge online repository system to share their knowledge, to help one another. So basically, if you want to start playing Halo, you can actually learn some tips or get some meaningful information from this page. And again, gaming culture, it actually helps. They want to help one another, so that like they can enjoy these games together. And playing alone together is one of the concept of MMO or MMORPG, like massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And sometimes you are actually one of millions of people who play the game. But when you play the game, you feel like, I mean, you can play by yourself. So and then if you want to play with others, you can actually join some guild or alliance so that you can play the game with like numbers of people. But what they really do is they use this grouping process to match people with the right people. So if you think about this alliance or guild in the game system, they actually use pretty interesting system of matching people, sometimes within the similar geographical region or within the similar age group. So they actually use this grouping process really interestingly, so that you can easily feel you are part of this guild or alliance. So this is some interesting concept, because when we do online education, sometimes you take a class with thousands of people, but if you actually use what MMORPG uses in their game system, we can create this better setup. Like you are taking this course with thousands of people, so that like sometimes you're not that motivated, but we can actually kind of make you feel that you are one person, one really important person who plays this game yourself. And if you need some help from other people, you can join this alliance or guild so that you can communicate or interact with other people within the same interest, so that you can stay motivated. And fluidity in learning. Okay, time to change. There shouldn't be one size fits all education. It should be changed. And the pandemic showed us that we can change things. And then it actually works for the next generation. And this one was one of the videos that I want to share. Bruce Lee.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
So one thing I want to talk about is our education system. Probably our current education system was set right after Industrial Revolution. Like we have major to grow or to equip sort of like workforce dedicated to that one field. But now we're talking about interdisciplinary, the interdisciplinary subject or like study, so that people actually combine multiple knowledges to create something new. I think pandemic showed us we can actually change the system and then we are ready to change, and then our students are ready to learn new things, and then they have an ability to be water, so that like they can observe new format or different format, all this the innovative things. And my last,
This is what it is, okay?
my last, oops, okay. And metaverse and immersive learning environment. And is metaverse here? I do not know, actually. I don't think so. And we sort of have metaverse in our like culture for a couple of decades already, but a lot of times when people talk about this metaverse or Ready Player One like metaverse, I don't think we're ready yet. But definitely is coming. And then this kind of hint us that some learning can be as effective or efficient in the immersive learning environments as it is in the real world, like aviation simulator. This one actually is the aviation simulator. And then again, the gap between that real or physical in-person experience and this secondhand or immersive virtual experience, the gap between those two are kind of like they become smaller and smaller and smaller. And my last slide is innovation in education. Okay, this image is that I took from online is about game-based learning. Okay? You can kind of think about good things about game-based learning, and there are so many good things we can try. And then besides that, I really want to emphasize that 21st century learners are already proficient in skills used in the game. Okay, maybe in our generation or older generation probably don't fully understand what they're doing, but like 21st century learners, our kids, our children, they actually learn. They grew up while playing these digital games and all these games. They're already proficient in skills, those skills. So it's all about connecting them, like those skill sets used in the game, to the right purposes. And pandemic showed us it actually has potential, and then we can definitely utilize that in 21st century learning environment after this pandemic. Okay, then I'm done with my slides, and I'm going to pass my baton to Professor Piccioni.
Okay,
And
Eric, you should be able to control stuff now. So go ahead and do it.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, welcome everybody.
This is very
Move this over here. I assume everybody can hear me okay? All right, good.
Yep.
All right. So welcome everybody. I heard recently a TED Talk from a man named Stuart Duncan. Now, Mr. Duncan, he created a virtual community within a game called Minecraft, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. The community that he created was called Autcraft, where children with autism would be able to play and interact together without fear of being bullied or harassed, and to be able to express themselves freely and learn to communicate with each other in a mutually supportive social atmosphere. He started this back in 2013 as a means to help his son, who has autism, but it quickly grew into an online community of more than 15,000 people. Kids on the server are free to be creative and to talk openly in an environment that they can trust. Now, he said that every so often he's asked whether or not the Autcraft server coddles children or prevents them from preparing for the harsh realities of the real world. Whether or not it's insulating them. But Duncan said that he found that the experience allows them to make mistakes, allows them to learn in a safe space with people who will encourage them and give them confidence so that they can be better prepared to face the world outside. He talked about players who had reached out to him years later as grown-ups to thank him for teaching them to be outspoken and self-assured. Some had landed their dream jobs because of the confidence that they had gained in the Oddcraft server community. Now, this is a powerful example of how gaming communities can transcend the game to connect people in a way that allows them to learn from each other. Oops, went too far. So yes, online games frequently become virtual worlds in which people of shared interests meet each other and work cooperatively to achieve objectives. While fighting monsters and winning races, these players are picking up social skills and learning to work as a team. In these games, they're motivated to work together, overcoming challenges and sharing their successes with their friends at home and interacting with people from all over the world. Now, the benefits of online video games extend the attributes for learning that games typically have in general. Like the games themselves, the communities have sprung up around the communities that have sprung up around them have been shown to encourage critical thinking, to improve motor skills, to promote key social skills such as leadership and team building. These games are increasingly used to teach in classrooms and businesses and many other areas, as we had mentioned before. When multiple people are playing together in a game setting, they get all of the benefits of game learning coupled with the teamwork and the shared experiences that typically come with real-world team building exercises. Now, as this graphic shows here on the slide, such games can improve players' problem-solving skills and can also build a sense of empathy to other players. These communities have also helped children come out of their shell, building friendships that can transcend physical distances. So there are many types of games that bring players together cooperatively. Professor Nam has already mentioned some role-playing games like World of Warcraft or League of Legends, simulation games like Second Life, casual games like Animal Crossing, and a whole bunch more besides those. These can be used as templates and can be adapted to educational games to create virtual learning communities in which students help each other toward common goals. Now, a team of researchers seeking to explore learning in game-related communities developed what's called the Game Community of Inquiry Scale, inspired by the Community of Inquiry model. The Game Community of Inquiry Scale describes how learning takes place for a group of individual learners through the educational experience that occurs at the intersection. There's a lot of words here that occurs at the intersection of social, cognitive, and teaching presence. Now, at that intersection, gaming communities can regulate learning. They can set the atmosphere for a positive experience and support discourse that will encourage players to actually reach out and help each other. Now, their findings suggested that gaming communities can serve as opportunities for meaningful learning when novice members are made to feel welcome and assisted by experts, and support is given to more marginalized gamers. They can encourage learning on an objective level, sure, but they can also encourage learning on an emotional level. Gaming communities at their best are about cooperation and support. Game communities can extend out from the game world to online streaming and esports tournaments. This is what's really fascinating about this, is that gamers tune in on streaming services to watch each other play video games with the same enthusiasm of diehard football fans. Some gamers attain star status among their audiences, gaining thousands or even millions of viewers. And when they play, the chat boards fill with comments, laughing and joking about joking with each other about what's going on, and amid shouts of support for the gamer. And beyond that, tournament gaming or esports has exploded in recent years. The global audience for esports is expected to hit 519 million people worldwide by 2024. And that's huge. And just like real world sports, these communities can lead to a stronger sense of social identity and self-esteem and a feeling of inclusiveness, of being a part of something. And all of this worldwide social gaming activity is leading us to the next phase, the metaverse. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse, including here today, just a moment ago, and what it will mean for society. The metaverse is a vision for an immersive virtual world where people can interact, conduct business, and socialize. Well, we're not there yet, of course, but when we are, it could be used as virtual reality classrooms, simulating any environment for a fully immersive educational experience. I mean, that's really cool. Imagine being able to explore the past, the present, the future in a virtual reality classroom that could take students anywhere they wanted to go. And this experience would be more than just virtual. It would have a live social element to it as well, as the class explores these new vistas together as a group. As I said, we're not there yet. But for now, while the metaverse is still under construction, educators can start thinking about ways in which they can best embrace this virtual world as a way to truly immerse their learning objectives in a meaningful, experiential way. As these communities grow, they will continue to evolve. Some have said that gaming communities will be the new global cities, defined not by physical location, but by shared interests. This will include educational interests. Learning in an online environment doesn't have to be an isolating experience, because whether it's on a Minecraft server or in a virtual classroom, students can learn with each other and from each other in a virtual environment of support and encouragement. They can learn to interact, to trust, to communicate in a way that will help build more powerful skills for social interaction in both the virtual and the real worlds. Thank you. That's my last slide. So at this point, does anybody have any questions? You could throw them up on the chat, or you could raise your hand if you prefer to be vocal. But
okay, yeah, we're good. We stopped sharing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pretend to be a host. There were a few questions already in the chat. I'm going to read them off, and then we'll have one of us answer. I think we can all answer them, so we'll take some turns, or whoever feels that most empowered to speak on it, feel free. And as Eric said, feel free to add more questions to the chat. We'll continue through them. I'm just going to go in order, or raise hands. Usually chat's just an easier format for all folks. So the first question we had while we were doing this is from Shane. What are some of the hesitations to introducing gaming in education? And I'll start, and you guys can pop in as well. I think one of the things that is a hesitation for gaming in education is typically sometimes generational. That's just one of them. You know, there's also monetary and other elements to it too. But some people see gaming as just being frivolous and fun. You know, things you grew up with, you did in your, you know, like I said earlier in the talk, it's like, oh, that's what you get to do after you've done something productive. And so you have to bridge that generational gap, and you have to make people understand, like, how are these being used and why they're being used, so that they further the agenda of the educator. And sometimes that's even getting the educator on board with the technology. Eric, did you want to add something to that?
Well, no, you're right. There definitely is a stigma involved in that, because, you know, gaming has a reputation. You know, it has a reputation for idleness, you know, and just for, you know, for a frivolous waste of time. You know, that's the reputation that it carries with it. But there is such a deeper impact that gaming has on the psyche, because it's so visual and it's so visceral. And so that's something that can be used to really help, you know, immerse somebody into the learning experience.
It can be a shared passion, which is huge, right? So, anything to add, Sanger?
Oh, we can talk about next one.
All right, that's what I figured. All right. Have you seen any examples, this was Catherine, have you seen any examples of how gaming has been implemented into a classroom well? I'm sure we've all seen plenty of them. Do you guys want to start? One of you guys saying, Eric?
I can talk about a couple. Well, if I look at the like K-12 settings, like I saw many teachers individually try to use a game to kind of help or encourage students to do more activities. So such as in US, especially in like elementary school setting, there's Schoology, which is basically kind of game-based learning platform. So a lot of times, like we use like a point system. Oh, if you finish this, you'll get the point, and then sometimes there's some reward. Even like a readathon or any activities, like there is point system, so that whenever you achieve that, you have some reward system. So there are tons of examples. And in high school setting, I saw like one English literature teacher uses MMORPG such as like Ultima Online, because the setting of the game is some medieval like England or Europe. So the game actually utilize some like Latins or Old English. So I saw people use that. And one last thing that I want to share, there is the school called Quest to Learn. I'm going to share that link on chat. And then actually there's a public middle school and high school. Their curriculum was basically built upon game-based learning. So actually, after our presentation, you can visit that website and then see how they actually run entire school system with the game-based learning curriculums.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I know that, you know, we use it in some of our stuff. We have a outreach program I mentioned earlier. We teach young kids, right? And using Minecraft or Roblox to teach other elements of education like math or English, etc. Make them read, you know, a book like Tom Sawyer and recreate what they read in Minecraft, or, you know, like they were interested in space, have them recreate a space launch in Minecraft or Roblox. It's a huge element that allows them to take their passion and education and hopefully transfer that passion. So, all right, next question was from Emer. You briefly mentioned that some people are worried escapism from gaming being a problem for some learners. How can this be controlled? That's a good one. I like that question. I think that's a kind of a universal problem to some degree too, right? Anything can be used as an escapism. People trying to learn, right? It can be books, it can be TV, it can be whatever that may be. It's all about moderation and use, I think, at some point. It's about taking that passion and motivation and pushing it from something, you know, that's they're just doing to pass the time to something productive and making that useful. And that's sometimes tough to do, and it's sometimes individual rather than group based. So Eric, you're saying you want to add on to that?
There's just one thing, like intervention. I mean, that's why we have teachers, and then some students, yes, they need to be intervened when these types of thing happens.
Yep. I think Denise was just giving us some good thoughts about challenges, about, you know, how to train trainers and how to best use gaming in the classroom, and I totally agree with that statement. It's because, again, they have to realize the return on investment, what it brings to the table, because just like everybody, we are mired in our old ways. Sang mentioned it, right? Like, we've been teaching the same way for quite a while now, right? It's changed somewhat, you know, it's less trade schools and more higher education or whatever. Like, we've changed a little bit, but we still do it the old fashioned way. And so we have to teach people. And so I definitely agree with that statement. That's great. We had another question. This is Sean, is your vision that gamification replaces traditional schooling, or can multiple approaches coexist alongside another? Who gets access to each form of education, if so? Did you raise your hand, Eric, or were you just swatting?
Oh, no. I have an answer to that, but
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Yes, the answer is they can totally coexist side by side. In fact, they can even be meshed together. You can actually set it up in such a way that that they play off each other. But there is definitely room for the traditional, the older traditional method and the newer method. Yeah, I think they can work well together.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I don't think it's just gamification, because yeah, you can say, oh yeah, you do your test and you get experience points and you make it like a role-playing game, and that's one form of it. You can make fully immersive simulations that teach everything. But again, even just like we talked about with kids being moderators, teachers have to be in moderation too, right? If you make them do education in Minecraft, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, blah, 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 eventually you're going to burn them out on things too. So there is that, how you present it and when you present it, that you do want to do a little bit of that. And to your second point in that question, who gets access? I mean, that's a really good question, because again, we're talking different countries, we're talking different levels of income or resources for a country or a community or a school or a family. And that's stuff we have to look at that, is inside and outside of just the educational. That's a community, that's a city thing. That's another topic, I think, altogether, but I think it's a really important one, because if we make something that requires virtual reality headsets, we've already limited the amount of people that can benefit from it, because we have to get hardware out there. That's only so much and so much cost. So
that's right.
Okay, we do have a hand up as well. Let me do the last one in chat, and then I will get to that as well. Michelle said, do you think games can help support people who have been out of work and education for long periods of time, and how would you engage that group? Anybody want to do that? I have an answer, but if anybody else wants to, I don't want to monopolize. I can just talk.
We can jump in after.
Okay. Yes, games can absolutely support people who have been out of work. In fact, re-educating people, and I do this in a whole nother topic. Skills have changed, jobs have changed, right? It's no longer just, you got a donkey out on the field farming, right? Now you've got tractors, and now you've got drones, and now you've got robots doing it, right? And now instead of being that person planting and picking stuff, you got to be the person programming and repairing, and like the types of things that are changing in our lives and in our culture and our society have changed. So absolutely, we should be looking at how do we educate people who are out of work, who need new skills, who, and getting them engaged is just a matter of finding that audience, just like a game would be like, how do we find that audience? How do we do something that's useful to them and, help them feel more productive and be more productive? And so, yes, absolutely games. And we've actually worked with some folks about potential things there. But again, it's slow going, just like a lot of changes are, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah.
And I think we had go ahead, Eric. Did you want to add to that?
I was just going to support that, and say that we're always learning. That's the thing, is that education never stops. And any opportunity to kind of catch up with the advances of our society are always a good one.
So we do have a hand up. I guess is Roisin? If you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, it's Roisin. It's more an observation than a question. I'm involved in the third level sector, and during the lockdown, COVID, we had to put all our field work, earth science, environmental science practicals online. But the only platform that was there was Google Earth, really, that you could do any measurements or anything. Now you could do a lot with Google Earth. But following that, because I'm interested in digital education, we got money through the university to try and develop an app, say, where you could demonstrate the changes in conditions since the last ice age and how the environment has changed, and trees, etc., etc. I won't go into the whole lot. But what happened was trying to get the content and the expertise into the gaming. Now, we probably should, except the funds aren't available, which is a real constraint with third level, to pay gaming companies to come in. But the students, anything we did do, they had so much fun with, and they could imagine realities of what would happen if the ice age had taken room at a different time, etc., etc. How the pollen of trees, like, I know I'm but the whole thing is really comes down to funding and expertise and trying to get, like I said, the expertise and content into the gaming community, or try and get more gamers into universities. They do quite well in the medical sector, and because they seem, and a lot of the pure sciences seem to have lots of money to get, but I'm between the arts and the sciences, and we struggle, you know, and all of students can use technology, all love games, all love learning from
I
that kind of
agree with you.
scenarios.
Oh yeah, simulations are powerful.
Oh yeah, and I agree with a lot of your points, right? Like somebody, like that was our first question, like what are hesitancies? Like some of the hesitancies is you have to have funding for it and you have to actually do it, but the technologies are becoming so ubiquitous that anybody can start to do this. You can take data from Google Earth and use it in Unity or Unreal and make these awesome things, and people love it. But yeah, it's about getting it done and making that content, and we'll shift and we'll get there.
The other thing I would like, one other thing I would like to see the gaming community do, like there's content available online that we looked into that, you know, say with National Geographic had great applications that you could, you know, put questions around a practical on, say, what do we do now? What should I do? Oh, the rubbish in the ocean, you know, but there was great things that they could do, and they could change the scenario or the content to suit themselves to see with different wind and waves. But there is very little available online. So it would be nice to have somewhere like that you can hold all these, and that other universities that have done it have shared it, or is there somewhere that I'm missing?
No, it's tough. It's because everybody has their own, like, you know, universities have their own stuff that they built, you know, companies have their own stuff they built, and to some degree, you know, there's, you know, competition for that and where it can be, and so there's not like a Wikipedia of all this educational content, unfortunately. But I think that's really kind of the benefit to this, and I know we're almost out of time, is this idea of a learning city is, if we take it on as a society, as different cultures, different cities, a community per se, and we make this a priority, it's not just a bunch of text on Wikipedia, it's how do we actually add to that games and learning experiences and things like that, and we put the emphasis there, then we can find a way to get, I think, some of that content that you've been seeking and looking for into more consolidated places, make it available for teachers so they will overcome some of those hesitancies. So thank you all. We're right at the time. So James, Eric, Sang, myself, we thank you for coming. Thank you for hosting. I know it's later there than it is here, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I know we recorded it, so hopefully it'll get passed around. And if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out. We'll put some of our information in chat, and I'm sure it'll be online as well. Always glad to help out and talk about stuff.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you all for being here.
All right. I think we're done.
That was fun.
That was good. Did a pretty good job on timing too.
Yeah.
Sang talked a little longer, but we knew that was going to happen, and Eric was about right, so it's all good. Thanks again, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for sticking around so late in the day.
Hey, your kid made an appearance there briefly, Sang.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, like over your shoulder while you were doing, like they probably didn't see it because they were probably watching the slides, but I was like, oh, hey. And of course I heard the dog a little bit, so, you know.
Okay, guys, I think I got rid of everyone.
No, that's fine.
It's fabulous. Guys, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I was really happy with the attendance, and I mean, everyone there was really engaged. Some really, really good questions there at the end. And it was lovely actually to hear someone come on and actually ask over the mic.
Right.
as well. So it's great. Thank you so much. I knew you'd be fantastic because I've seen you before, but you know, I'm really delighted. People really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, just send us a link to it when you have the recording up
We had a
somewhere.
great time.